Welcome to Conscious Conversations, a place where East meets West, a place where conversations and ideas will challenge your minds, expand your consciousness, awaken your heart, and make you think more deeply about yourself and the world.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Conscious Conversations. I'm happy to be here with all of you, and I'm very happy to be back with co-host Wes Gordon. How are you doing, Wes?
Better, much better.
Good. We're happy to hear that. Got a lot of nice comments from people saying that they were sending some good vibes and prayers your way, and that you were missed on last week's show.
Thanks. I needed it.
But it's good to have you back. Good to continue these conversations that we've been having now for, I think we're going on our seventh month now, if you could believe that.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah.
A long time. But I've been really enjoying these. And since a holiday is right around the corner, a very special day that's often filled with love, and one in which we, share our love with others. It might have been created more of a Hallmark sort of holiday, but I think it's a good day to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is actually love. Now, love has a variety of meanings to many different people. I do believe that the word in and of itself has sort of become a little bit degraded, because we utilize and talk about love in many different things, and there's many different forms of love. There's we talked about in one of our shows those 4 levels, the agape and the filial and all of that. But here we're going to be talking more about spiritual love and how it is really a key ingredient to the development of our spiritual growth, and how it's sort of a necessary thing for us to try to cultivate, nurture, and strive to manifest more in our life if we really want to start becoming aware of our deeper spiritual essence and spiritual nature. All of the great founders, well, I don't know if you would call them founders, but the great teachers, enlightened beings, and great avatars and wisdom figures that have been on this earth, they really stressed how important love is. Many are very well aware within the Christian traditions how Jesus said that the commandment I give you is to love one another. And he said, if you love one another, then others will know that you are my disciples. And within the Hindu tradition, within one of their very sacred books and texts called the Bhagavad Gita, God is speaking and says, the way of love leads sure and swift to me. And within the Buddhist text, there is a teaching in which one of the sutras, Buddha tells his monks and nuns to radiate boundless love towards all beings. And even in the Zoroastrian tradition in Zarathustra, he said our life should be one in which we live good or loving thoughts, words, and deeds at all times. And so this idea of showing love, expressing love, and cultivating love, and nurturing that quality is definitely, if we just go throughout all the ancient traditions and texts up till today, a key point that's necessary for us to grow spiritually. And what's your take on the importance of love in our life?
Oh, it can't be underestimated. It's absolutely critical. And our world is suffering from such a shortage of love.
I agree with you on that.
When I was growing up, it was non-existent, so to speak.
Right.
I remember going to school one morning in middle school. On my way out, I just happened to spontaneously hug my grandmother because I was staying there because my parents were split.
Okay.
I just spontaneously hugged her before I went to school. And that lady, there was like a transformation that happened. I didn't realize how bad she was starving to death for love.
Wow.
And I don't normally hug people in my family.
Yes.
And it's not something our family did a lot, but I just did it spontaneously because I felt good.
Yeah.
I was blown away walking to school that morning. I had never seen such a shift in a person's energy. From that moment on, I could do no wrong in that lady's life. It was mind-blowing.
That is absolutely beautiful. I love that story. And, we never know what kind of impact we can have on people's lives by showing a little bit of love.
Yeah.
Whether it be through a hug, whether it be through a smile, whether it be through a kind word or a nice glance.
Yep.
Just if the intention behind it is one of love, it totally is a transforming power.
Yes.
And so I believe, there's often that, statement, people have key change, what would Jesus do? And, another thing we can think about before we act or speak or do anything is say to ourselves, well, what would love do in this case?
Right.
Which, of course, I do believe Christ was manifesting a high level of love for humanity.
Yes.
But if we, if we don't resonate with that sort of, Christian, figure or terminology, then just saying to ourselves before we do anything, what would love do? And are we acting from love? I think could be a powerful ingredient. Within the Eastern traditions of Hinduism, they actually say that there are sort of 4 paths to spiritual growth and spiritual development that one can undertake. And it's often called yogas, and yoga means union. So what you're, uniting yourself to is your spiritual self or God or whatever essence you want, or label you want to put on that essence. But the 4th that they consider is, one is called karmic yoga, in which you're going out and doing selfless or loving deeds. You're not seeking any reward from what you're doing. You're just doing this in order to sort of build up good merit and burn off some, negative actions or, sinful or unskillful actions that you've undertaken in your life. And those good works will help you to eventually grow and develop. They do say it's a very long time to walk the karmic path or karmic yoga path. It would actually take multiple lifetimes within their tradition to do that.
Yeah.
But then the second one is known as jhana yoga, in which you're trying to unite yourself or grow and develop spiritually through the study of like scriptures or like wisdom, and studying the text and learning what is God saying, or how can I live better through these inspired writings that have been written throughout the ages. The third one is called bhakti yoga, and bhakti is the path of love and devotion. And it's one in which you're totally just devoted and trying to generate this love for God, or it's like a pure love for God and a compassionate love for all beings that one is trying to cultivate. And then the 4th one is Raja Yoga, which is called the Royal Way, and that's the path of meditation itself. However, they would say that they're all, even though they talk about them separately, they would say that they're all intimately connected and really do overlap with one another. So whether you're practicing karma yoga or jhana yoga or practicing meditation, the intention behind it should still be one of love. Okay. Because it's like the magnetic force that sort of draws us higher, or if you want to say draws God to us or draws us to God. And so great spiritual development comes from the power of love itself.
Exactly. And just to be clear, you're stating yoga.
Yes.
Yoga is an outlook or a practice of how to live a certain modality of life. Because most people, when I hear the word yoga, I think of exercise and stretching.
That is an excellent question, and I'm glad you asked that. Yes, and maybe I should have been a little bit more specific, but no, it led to this question. So yes, most people here in the United States think of yoga as these body postures and positions and, contorting yourself in all of these strange sort of exercises and poses. But you're right, that is not the totality of yoga. That is a small little, what they call limb of yoga, which is actually specifically not called yoga, but called asana practice. Oh, really? So you're practicing these postures, which are known as the asanas, and or asanas is another way they pronounce that. But yoga is more of a lifestyle, and there's 8 limbs to yoga that people are actually trying to incorporate into their life, not just the postures and positions. So very good question. And one of those paths to union is through love itself, which is why in the Bhagavad Gita there is that statement that's from God which says, love is the way that leads sure and swift to me. They say it's the quickest path to God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then also what I find interesting is that when we talk about like future times in many of the ancient texts, whether it be the Hindus, the Buddhists, they all talk about, humanity falling down or degrading into a degenerate time, or in the Hindu text they call it the Kali Yuga, or the even the Christian, the Islam or the Muslims, and even the Jews. They also believe that humanity will fall into like a degenerate times. And there's many teachings in which they say during that time, people's hearts will grow cold. Right. And people's love will grow cold, and love will dry up. And even within the Quran, it says that at that time, it's not the eyes that will become blind, but blinded will be and become the hearts of men. And I find that very interesting that they're all saying that, because you yourself opened up saying that, where is the love in this world?
Exactly. You bring up a good point. How do we cultivate that? If you didn't have it growing up or seen it or understood it, some action, how do you naturally start to make that happen for yourself?
Right. And that's an excellent question, but I think we need to pause right here and maybe we'll answer that or try to answer it in what our opinion of it is when we come back after these messages. So please stay with us. Welcome back to Conscious Conversations. We're here and we're having a discussion on how love is a key ingredient to spiritual growth and spiritual development. And me and Wes were having a little bit of a talk on, this idea of spiritual love and how in today's society, in today's world, it seems to be a little bit lacking. And I also brought up the point that it's in all the ancient texts when they would say that humanity would begin to move into a darker time or degenerate time or, the last days. And sometimes
we're there. Sorry, we're there.
Are you prophesying right now?
I think so. I'm feeling it.
It's stated that people's hearts and love would grow cold and grow hard, and that it's not the eyes that would be blinded, but the hearts would become blinded. And so you ask the question, well, how do we begin to nurture this, especially in many societies where it wasn't something we did quite regularly?
Yeah.
And that's an excellent question. And I believe it does take a lot of hard work, change, because if we're not brought up in a way where it's where love is being expressed freely, sometimes it feels very awkward. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it even feels like sappy or, too emotional or sometimes, it's like, well, especially if you're a man, to be overly loving and all of that stuff is in some way a weakness.
Right.
Or like, you shouldn't be acting that way. Man up and be a little bit more, harder. And, if you're coming from love and compassion, that's not what a man does. And so in some ways it's been sort of ingrained in society, even, this whole idea that, well, boys don't cry, so if you become emotional and love moves you to tears, are you supposed to hold that in? So there's a lot of work that needs to do psychologically in order to really bring love forward more. There are deep practices that have been taught throughout many traditions. So one of the ones that I resonate with a lot is something called the loving kindness practice of meditation, in which it's believed within the Eastern tradition of Buddhism that we all have a seed of love within us that we need to nurture and cultivate. And through this practice of meditation known as loving kindness, we try to bring that forth by sending out these little well wishes and thoughts of love and compassion to ourselves, others, in the world. So that's one thing that we can do. But we can also begin to see, become more aware and mindful of the types of words we speak and the thoughts that we think. And, are they coming from a place of love and compassion, or are they coming more from a place of judgment or criticism or, unkindness? But you have any tips on how to maybe cultivate? Because, that little spontaneous hug for your grandmother changed.
Yeah, I didn't know how lacking she was in emotional support and touch. And I hadn't got a lot of it growing up either. So to do that was kind of, not my norm, but the reaction was mind-blowing. Right. But, you bring up a excellent point on how do you, for me, it felt like anytime I had to show love for something, I felt like I was draining myself because I didn't have nothing to draw from. That's what drew me to the church originally, is because these people seemed to have a form of care that was beyond the normal. Okay. But as I got older, I realized I've seen people that weren't ever in church love me more than the ones that were. Sorry to say that, but I've seen that. That's not across the board, but maybe one of my suggestions at this point in my life would be start out loving plants, work up to a dog or cat, maybe a fish.
Find something you can.
Then when you get more filled up, work towards people. Right. Because people can be very hard and contentious. Yes. Because they don't always reflect it back. And sometimes they take shots at you, or they take advantage of your good-heartedness.
Oh, absolutely. I know many situations where people have been very kind, open-hearted, loving, and there are people out there that actually sort of, in a predatory way, prey upon that.
Look for it. Yep.
They look for it, and then they take advantage of that kindness and that love and compassion that the other person's giving, and they really never had any intention to selflessly give anything back to them. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so one thing I find within the another factor of this whole idea of love being a key ingredient is the Sufi mystic Rumi once said that love is the greatest gift, or love's greatest gift, is its ability to make everything it touches sacred. And I believe that's sort of what happened with you and your grandmother when you just shared that story right now, is that when you spontaneously hugged her, that moment became a sacred moment of a bond between the two of you.
It did.
And so, you know, when we do things and when everything we do has that intention of love behind it, I do believe that it becomes sacred. And why it's a key ingredient to spiritual growth and development is that when we can learn ways to begin to manifest it more, we're truly at its underlying essence beginning to manifest an intense quality that is a characteristic nature of God itself. You know, in many traditions, it's said that God is love, love is God, and, you know, those who don't know love don't know God. And so I believe that when we can truly express a selfless form of love, we are innately making the ground we touch or the interactions we have with people or relationships sacred by bringing God's presence or practicing the presence of God in the world around us.
That's a great explanation, because that reflects back to me the fact that how powerful a truly loving, empowered being actually is and has healthy boundaries.
Yes.
And when you're in their presence and they reflect and communicate with you, you pick that up, that this love isn't the mamby-pamby going to just do everything for everybody.
No, sometimes love says no.
It knows when to stand up and when one action is more loving versus the other. That is powerful beyond belief. But there's so few people that I've met that actually possess that presence.
Yeah, and that level of it. I think it goes back to the, you know, this idea of the whole different types of love and people's understanding of, well, I can't say, but in my view, I wonder how many people truly take a moment to step back and contemplate the question, what is love, or what does love mean to me, or how do I define it? Because some people can just define it as having like affectionate feelings towards somebody.
Right.
And some people could just define it as, you know, like a cordialness between somebody or an intense intimacy between people. And so I think you really need to get down to the level of when these spiritual avatars and great beings and wisdom figures throughout the ages and great teachers were teaching about spiritual love. What did they really mean? Because I believe with love comes understanding, and without understanding another, we can't, you know, truly give them love or know fully what love is. And so that's an important ingredient. And, you know, one way to do that is to not overthink it. I think also, like, sometimes we come so much from an intellectual level.
Yes.
And I think it's dropping down from the head and moving into the heart that also becomes a key ingredient to living like a heart-centered life or a loving-centered life. There's a wonderful book. It's often thought of as a children's book, but I still enjoy it today being an adult, and it's called The Little Prince. And in The Little Prince, there's this one moment where he says, "It is through the heart that one can see rightly." And I believe that that's a powerful statement because, you know, when sometimes we're so analytical, we overthink things, and the mind sort of takes us out of, you know, what was really the appropriate loving thing to do. And, you know, if we just go from that heart-centered space and try to see through the heart, I think that you're more in line with that, with the true love that these great figures were talking about.
Absolutely. That was what was unique about that encounter with my grandmother. I did that spontaneously,
right,
in appreciation of the fact she was seeing me off to school, having no clue the reaction that she was going to have internally. I felt her literally shift.
Yes.
When I walked to school that morning, it was just, for my age, I went, what just happened?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you were leaving the house on a high too, because you sensed back from her, wow, the overwhelming feeling of whatever was love or gratitude that was now emanating from her for the slightest thing of just giving her a hug.
That's it.
And so that's beautiful. And sometimes that's all it is. Sometimes that's the only way we need to show love is simply by something as little as that.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's just sitting and not even saying a word. It's just giving the other person our time and attention and being an ear for them to maybe share, express, or, you know, talk about what's going on in their life.
I think the intention and purity part's huge too, because there was nothing expected back.
Right. And that is a key component. Every spiritual tradition also says that when your love is expecting anything, or when it has conditions like, well, okay, I'll give you this, but as long as I can get this in return,
right,
then that's not
real love.
That's not real love, or that's not the love that leads to
selfish love.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that doesn't lead to spiritual growth. That becomes an obstacle to spiritual growth. But one more thing about, since we're on this topic of love, and maybe we'll devote another show to this in the future, though, is that sometimes people only think about loving another. But another important quality is actually also loving who you are and loving yourself. Yes. In fact, one of my mentors, Jack Kornfield, a very common thing that he often says in a couple of his books was that if your circle of love does not include yourself, it is actually incomplete.
Absolutely.
And I think in today's world, there is this sort of movement now towards self-love, self-care, self-nurturing that I think is important because in many ways, a lot of people are going through their life lacking that. They speak unkind words about themselves, or they think or criticize themselves in such a way that, they wouldn't say these things about a friend.
Right.
So I think an important aspect to really learning how to love and develop and move forward in our spiritual growth is to also start where we are and have the ability to love who we are.
Yeah, in a healthy, holistic way.
Yes.
When I first encountered the concept of you should love yourself, I'd come from such a void. I thought, who do you think you are, you ego-based whatever? Not understanding the healthy version of loving myself was like nurturing or taking care of my physicality or thinking, of more of myself so I didn't do something low or, a clean environment. I'm worth that. That didn't register at first.
Yeah, and I think that's something that happens to a lot of people. When they talk about self-love, they hear about self-love. All of the ancient teachings or what they've been taught in the past is that, well, we got to love others and we got to serve others and let yourself be like on the back burner. Forget yourself and just do all of that. But that can be very exhausting, very draining if we don't refill our tank. And, even Jesus and the great teachers and Buddha and all of them, when they would go out and be in the crowds, and give of themselves and give love and, give their teachings, they also then went and maybe retreated by themselves.
Yes.
To also fill themselves back up or reconnect or recharge themselves, however you want to think of that, and be filled with God again or fill their battery back up. And I think that's a necessary component to
a healthy balance.
Yeah. But I think we need to end here. We thank you all so much. We hope you enjoyed this. Please leave your comments below. Let us know how you think love is an ingredient to the spiritual path. And we look forward to you joining us again, hopefully next week. Thank you, Wes. It's always good to be back with you. And we hope that each and every one of your days is filled with an abundance of love, happiness, and peace.